is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless with a very bad cold today, but I wasn't going to cancel this incredible interview because I've been looking forward to meeting and talking with Dr. Amie Hornaman, who is the thyroid fixer. And many of you have heard of Amie. She's very well known on the internet and also for her work with the thyroid, which it's pretty obvious. I want Amie to tell us today. First of all, welcome, Amie, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I wanted you to tell us your journey because you have one of the most fascinating stories. I call it um, pain to purpose to passion, and
Love it.
and honestly, I've found so many of my guests have had the exact same kind of epiphany, that through adversity comes opportunity. So, why don't you start by telling us what happened to you and why and how you got to where you are today?
Oh, 100%. First of all, thank you for having me. Second, I always say pain to purpose, but now I'm going to tag on the passion because I love that.
Yeah,
Love that.
yeah.
And yeah, that's exactly my story. So we're going to rewind, oh goodness, 25-ish years ago when I was competing in figure competitions and I did fitness modeling at the same time. So, the whole prep for the show is chicken, broccoli, asparagus. You're hitting the gym twice a day. I mean, things that as a competitor, as a fitness athlete, you do over and over and over again. So, you know how your body's supposed to respond. Now, it's always nice to have a coach, which I did. So, I had a coach and he would tell me what to do and send me my diet, my workout program. But every time we did this together, it always worked. And I would get nice and lean, step on stage, step in front of the camera, no problem. This one particular show, and we're talking probably 10, 15, 20 shows and photo shoots in. This one show I'm getting ready for. And, I'm stepping on the scale, sending him before and after pictures. This one show I'm getting ready for, the scale keeps going up. And I mean, 5 pounds the first week to where I'm like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense, but maybe, okay, maybe I'm eating too much. Maybe I just need to do like a third cardio of the day, step on my cardio a little bit more, go an hour and a half with it instead. And then the next week went by, stepped on the scale again. Now it's up 10 pounds. And I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't making sense. Like my body's rebelling against me. So I'm checking in with my coach. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, no, seriously, I'm not cheating on my diet. I'm doing everything how you have it laid out perfectly. And, I mean, the whispers start at this point, right? So everybody in the gym that used to see me get ready and compete, they're like, oh, she's eating the donuts. That's why she's not getting ready. She's wearing sweatshirts in the gym. She's not going to do the show. Well, they were right and wrong. I wasn't going to do the show because my body was rebelling against me, but I wasn't eating the donuts. I was
Right.
doing all the things and probably to a too strict point at that point because I was so frustrated and disappointed and really started to lose hope. So let's keep going. Week number 3, week number 4, week number 5, that scale went up a total of 25 pounds. After that, I stopped getting on, but I'm pretty sure that on my 5'2" frame, I was carrying around an extra 40 pounds with no answers as to why. So, at that point, I did what we all do. I started doctor Googling and I started actually going to doctors. So I
Yeah.
went to my first doctor. I said, hey, what's going on? My body is rebelling against me. This doesn't make any sense. Like biologically, it doesn't make sense. Whether you believe in calories in, calories out or not, it doesn't make sense. So that doctor looks at me, ran some labs, said, you're normal. Everything is fine.
Mhm.
I said, okay, well, I don't feel normal. I don't feel fine. I don't accept that. So I am going for a second opinion because that's what we have the right to do. So I go for the second opinion. That doctor tells me, oh, it's all in your head. Why don't you just eat less and exercise more?
Ugh.
It was impossible. I
Yeah.
was already eating so little. My calories were probably around 1,000, which is not good. And I
Right.
was working out twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. So that was not possible. Now, was I actually probably attacking my own adrenals at this point. Yeah, because I was really stressed out and I was looking for anything that would help at that point. I went to a total of 6 different doctors who all told me, this is under the medical gaslighting umbrella. They all told me you're normal, everything's fine, eat less and exercise more. It's all in your head. You're just getting older. That one was good because I was in my 20s. Um, and really the things that they said to me should have been written down and bookmarked because they were horrendous.
Yeah.
By that 6th doctor, I remember going to my car in the parking lot and I put my head on the steering wheel and just started crying and literally praying to God for any diagnosis. And I know that sounds horrible. Like I never want to wish anything terminal on myself, for goodness sake, power in what we think. But I was so frustrated and so depleted that any diagnosis would have at least been an answer. And it would at least given us a direction in which to move to maybe reverse this thing that was happening in my body. So then I go to doctor number 7. I don't stop. Thank God I don't stop. I go to doctor number 7. This is another endocrinologist. I saw metabolic specialists. I saw endocrinologists. I saw GPs. I saw OBGYNs. So here's yet another endocrinologist, right? Supposed to know the endocrine system. Well, I give her some credit because she actually touched my throat and said swallow. And she's feeling around and she says, okay, there's a nodule in there that we're going to have ultrasounded. But based on your labs, you have Hashimoto's, which is hypothyroidism.
Right.
And now here's a pill. So I left her office. I'm like, this is it.
Yeah.
I got it. I got the diagnosis. And now I have a pill that's going to fix me.
Right.
That pill was Synthroid.
Right.
Which we're going to get into more, right?
Or which is not going to make the difference. Okay.
We're going to talk more about that.
Okay.
So I gave that tea for 5 months and I did not lose 1 pound.
Yeah.
So back to Dr. Google. So I start looking things up about this thyroid thing, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, treatment for, and I find, there's these other thyroid hormones. Okay, wait, I'm taking T4. T4 is the inactive thyroid hormone. There's T3 that's active. There's T2 that's active. So I go back to her and I say, there's these other thyroid hormones. And one of these articles actually says the T4 works better when it's combined. When you combine it with these other thyroid hormones, can we do that? She goes, I don't do that. That's not standard of care. And all I can do is prescribe you T4. And I said, well, I'm going to find somebody who can then.
Yeah.
I kept hearing the name of this functional doctor. When you hear names 3 times, you're like, okay, thank you. I'm getting the message. So I actually listened to the message that was being given to me. And I went to see this functional doc. Now, back in the day, I call him functional now, but we didn't even have that term. It was integrative. It was alternative.
Right.
But regardless, he was a pharmacist. He was a naturopath. He was a functional practitioner. I mean, just all the things under one umbrella. He sat with me for 90 minutes.
Wow.
He ordered this book of blood work that in those 90 minutes, he actually went through with me and started putting the pieces of the puzzle together, something no other doctor had ever done. Right. And then he asked me the 4 most important words that anyone should ask any patient. So any practitioner out there should be asking their patients, as you as a patient should be hearing these words. How do you feel?
Yes, I knew you were going to say that.
Right? Never heard that from any other doctor I went to either.
Yeah.
So with that information, he was able to put those pieces of the puzzle together and put me on the right track with the right thyroid hormone replacement, with the right supplementation. We changed up my diet a little bit, but it wasn't the diet and the supplements and the exercise. It wasn't that. And that shows you how important it is to have your thyroid optimized, because it doesn't matter what you do. Right. If your thyroid is in the toilet, nothing is going to work. We changed all that up, and he literally saved my life. So from that point on, I changed careers. He became my mentor. I got into 5 to 7 minute insurance-based visit with your GP or your OBGYN. You need to be doing functional medicine, and you need to be meeting for a long time to really put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Water and Wellness. Water and Wellness is one of the best companies to find purified water. They have a countertop system that I use, and I travel with it all the time. So I would highly recommend you look at that. If you use the Ageless code, you'll get a 10% discount. waterandwellness.com/pages/Ageless and Timeless. That's how you can order to get the discount. So visit waterandwellness.com or call 877-296-6880 to learn how to take control of your drinking water and learn about all those natural additives to optimize your health and longevity. Okay, so the things that I hear that are going to be really helpful to people that are listening today, and I hope my viewers and listeners are take a piece of paper and a pen and write notes, because this is so important what you're telling us. The first thing that I hear is how underdiagnosed or misunderstood the thyroid is. And yet it is one of the most important organs in the body. So why don't you tell us more about that part of it? Why is it so underdiagnosed? But before you do, I know that doctor you found was 85 years old when you found him. So is he still alive today?
He's still alive, but definitely not in practice. Not
Yeah.
in practice anymore. Yeah.
Do you still interact with him?
I do. I do. I love him to death. And he's just, thrilled to see where I took the knowledge that he imparted on me. So it's really
Okay.
nice to keep in touch. Yeah.
Okay. So let's do all things thyroid today. I this is so important, and this is why I've been so eager to, basically, we talked 3 or 4 months ago, but I've been so eager to have you on the show because I know how many people are not. What is it? 6 million people in America are have a thyroid condition, and how many more? 8 million are never diagnosed.
Yes.
That,
Yes. Very
that
nice. Great stats. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean that's just completely amazing. And then we have a 65% obesity rate at least. So how
Yep.
many of those 65%, if they knew that what their thyroid was doing or wasn't doing, might actually not be obese? So we're just talking about the weight issue, but there's so many other energy, metabolic function, which of course affects weight,
Mm-hmm.
heat, all these brain cognitive function, all these parts of the body that do not get productive or are not productive if the thyroid is not working. So let's dive in and talk to us about all the different aspects of the thyroid, starting with the T4, which is what you were, given, but was not working. And why is that? So if you could just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it. Okay. Brief anatomy lesson on the thyroid. So the thyroid, butterfly shaped gland in your neck, it is the master gland. So it controls your blood pressure, your heart rate, your metabolism, your cell turnover. So whether or not you're growing your hair, turning skin cells over, dry skin is a really big symptom when you have hypothyroidism. If you think of hypothyroidism, think low and slow, hypo, low and slow. So if
Yeah.
you think of that, everything is going to be slowed down from your mood, your brain processing, thinking, memory, heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature. Many people are cold when the rest of the room is totally comfortable.
Right.
Gut motility. A lot of thyroid patients do not go to the bathroom every single day, and that's vital. Metabolism, fat burning, muscle building. I mean, you name it, everything goes low and slow when you are in a hypothyroid state. So it really is the master gland. Now, that thyroid gland produces 4 different hormones: T1, T2, T3, T4. T1, we can just set that aside. It really does nothing. T4 is inactive, where T3 and T2 are active. So what does that mean? T4 is inactive, meaning if we look at your cells, on the outer surface of the cell, you're going to have a receptor site on every single cell in your body, trillions, trillions, trillions of cells.
Yeah.
Every single cell in your body has a receptor site on it for thyroid hormone, but for T3 thyroid hormone.
Yeah.
So T4, it's inactive. It has to convert and it has to become T3 in order to get to the receptor site to do its job, to turn on, think of a lock and key, to turn on that cell, to turn on your metabolism, to turn on your brain, to turn on your ATP production at the mitochondrial level, which is going to give you energy. So that T4 has to convert and become T3. That conversion process, I joke and I say I equate it to running 10 Tough Mudders because it's a really hard process for the body to do. And
Uh-huh.
there are so many things that get in the way. So many things. So when we are looking at that conversion, we test something called reverse T3. So when we're looking at all the tests to get for your thyroid, reverse T3 is one of the most important tests in addition to free T3. I'll get to that in a minute. We look at reverse T3, and if that reverse T3 is above a 12, we go, oh, this person is having issues converting their T4 over into T3. And we do things to rectify that. Now, when we're looking at the active thyroid hormones, there's T3 and T2. We test free T3, meaning the unbound, ready to attach to your cell active thyroid hormone. And with T2, there is no test for T2 because, and we can dive more into what is T2 and how it can help people. There's no test for T2, but it is an active thyroid hormone. And anyone can take T2 because it's over the counter, whereas T4 and T3 are under prescriptions. T2 is over the counter.
And
Now,
why, Amy,
yeah, but
for interrupting, but why is there no test for T2?
that's a great question. Honestly, I think if we really unpack it and look at it, it's because T2 is in supplemental form. And we know Big Pharma wants to push people down the medication route. Now, I don't have a problem with thyroid medication. I do not. I do not think that it is under the Big Pharma label of, Big Pharma wants to put you on a statin or an antidepressant. They want to put you on these Band-Aid
Yeah.
prescription drugs instead of using bioidentical hormones or using thyroid replacement therapy. But still, I mean, we're still talking about the Big Pharma world. And that still comes down to, if we test for something, there better be a script that we can write for it afterwards. So if we test for T2, then that better be in medication form, prescription form, and it's not. It's
Okay.
available over the counter in supplemental form, and Big Pharma doesn't make money off of supplements. So, I mean, if we really unpack it, that's what I believe, because there is a T2 measurement when we're looking at the studies done on T2, but it's not universal to where you could go to LabCorp and order it.
Okay. So is T2 necessary to affect T3 production?
No, that's a great question. They work independently.
Okay.
So let's say we have someone that we know they need that active thyroid hormone. So if you go back to my story, I was given T4. It
Yeah.
was inactive. It did not work. I saw my functional medicine practitioner put me on Armor Thyroid, which is a blend of T4 and T3, and
Right.
eventually moved me to T3 only because I do not convert well. I have a genetic SNP that prevents conversion.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at that, yes, I am on T3 only, but I still take T2 because T2 doesn't affect my thyroid function. It doesn't affect my thyroid numbers, and it works at the mitochondrial level to increase my basal metabolic rate. So I'll still take T2 for my metabolism, for fat burning, for energy, but I'll be on my T3 medication prescription as well. So kind of doing two different things.
Okay. And so let's talk about the thyroid stimulating hormone, which is not a thyroid hormone, it's a pituitary. So can you tell us how that affects the T2 and T3 and T4
Yeah.
production? Where does that come in?
I love that you said that because I say that all the time. It is not a thyroid hormone, not a thyroid hormone. It is a brain hormone, pituitary hormone. So TSH is It's like, you know, when your kid, let's say, leaves toys all over the room and you're like, Johnny, you got to go pick up your toys. And he doesn't listen. And your voice gets louder. You're like, Johnny, got to
Yeah.
go pick up those toys. Johnny. And then, you know, it starts getting louder, louder, louder
Yeah.
until you're screaming. And then Johnny maybe kind of sort of listens. So TSH is the same way. It's talking at your thyroid. And then it starts to get louder when the thyroid doesn't listen. Hey, thyroid, you got to make more T4 and T3. Hey, thyroid, come on. You're not doing your job. You got to make more T4 and T3. So as that TSH goes up,
Yeah.
think of it as getting louder. The brain is yelling at the thyroid, noticing that it's not doing its job and it's poking it and it's yelling at it. It's like, come on, trying to stimulate the thyroid to make more thyroid hormone. Now, we don't look at TSH as the be all end all marker like they do in conventional medicine. In conventional medicine, doctors have learned you test TSH, and if TSH is above a 4.5, which is the current cutoff in labs, then you give T4. That's all. That is all they have learned. And we know so much more than that in functional medicine. First of all, in functional medicine, we have a totally different optimal range,
Right.
meaning we want your TSH to actually be below a 2.
Right.
And even that, we'll still see patients come in with a beautiful TSH, a 1, a 0.5.
Right.
And yet, when we look at the other tests that we should be looking at, we
Right.
still see that they have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's because TSH is not the be all end all test. So
Right.
it's nice to look at if it's super high and it's flagged high and it's red. That tells us, yeah, your brain is screaming at your thyroid because your thyroid's not doing a good job at making those thyroid hormones. But if it's not screaming, we still have to look further.
So is the thyroid like the can be like in the blood work like cortisol, where if you take a prick of the finger or a vial of blood at a certain time, you can have one level, but later on in the day, or based on your stress level or other activities that day, what you ate, and so on, does that affect the blood levels of the thyroid? In other words, is it one of those uh, organs that is very sensitive to the timing of when the blood is drawn?
Yes and no. So we like to do labs in the morning when we're checking thyroid because TSH will change throughout the day. But when you're looking at the really, really important markers like free T3 and reverse T3, and then your antibodies,
Yeah.
those aren't really going to fluctuate that much based on the time of day. They're
Okay.
not going to fluctuate based on what you eat. Stress might affect the reverse T3 a little
Yeah.
bit, but we can kind of get a really good idea of that when we talk to the person, ask them about their stress levels, what they're dealing with, and see if that's playing a role with the reverse T3. But mainly it's number one, you take it in the morning. Number two, if you are on thyroid medication of any kind,
Yeah.
then you want to hold that for 18 to 24 hours before your labs, especially
Yeah.
if it contains T3 in it. You want to hold your thyroid medication. And then you also don't want to take biotin for 5 to 7 days
Oh.
before a thyroid lab.
Oh. Why is that, Amie?
It can affect the TSH and the free T3.
Oh, well, that's something I don't think most people have never heard that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
biotin is in a lot of supplements. I mean, I take it sublingually in the morning, but I know I've seen it in the ingredients in other supplements that I take. So that would be something you would really have to investigate before you do your tests.
Yes.
So,
Yes, exactly.
okay, so tell us about the antibodies. Let's just say well, first, before I ask that question, what, why is the Barnes method used instead of blood work? Because they say that you can be normal in your thyroid blood work, and still, if you ask that important question that you mentioned earlier, how do you feel? You still have hypothyroidism. So then they say use the Barnes method. Do you want to talk about that, or is that somewhat antiquated?
I think it's pretty antiquated because we can get a very accurate picture through blood. Now, I do like blood over saliva. A lot of times I'll get that question, is saliva accurate? I have tested saliva with hormones, with thyroid, and I cannot find a good consistency with that. The
Yeah,
only time I'll use saliva is with if we're testing cortisol through the day, like a 4-point saliva cortisol panel.
yeah,
But
yeah.
other than that, just a nice, good old fashioned blood draw.
Which is so much
And
easier, and then doing urine, saliva, or stool. So good.
yeah.
That's good. But all the years I've been testing my thyroid, I was told that you could come out with levels that are normal, but your thyroid, you still don't feel well. So
Well, then, yeah, then we have to break down normal versus optimal. So that comes back more to discussing the standard lab value range on that blood test that you get. So on any blood test, you're going to see over here like a reference range. And that's what your conventional doctor is looking at to go, oh, look, your labs are normal. So the first doctor I saw, remember, I got that. Yep, you're normal, air
yeah,
quotes here, normal.
yeah,
And that's what they're looking at. Now, it's important to remember that that standard lab value range, that reference range, was taken from groups of sick people. They
yeah,
did not stop to say, we're testing all of these people, but we have 65% of them are obese, like you quoted in the beginning, which is
yeah,
true. And
yeah,
then we have people with cancer, we have heart disease, we have these people that aren't taking care of themselves, they're eating McDonald's, whatever.
yeah,
Whereas functional medicine comes in and we narrow that down
yeah,
and we say, let's test the badasses. Let's test that 70-year-old over there that's still skiing down a mountain.
yeah,
Let's test that 65-year-old that has like a rock hard muscular body.
yeah,
And let's figure out what their levels are
yeah.
because that's going to give us that optimal range. That's where people are going to feel their best. Not out here in the standard lab value range that's wide and vast and huge and who God knows what kind of sick people were tested for this. We want to take that narrow bullseye optimal range. And that's where I want people to be, where we know there's a 99.9% chance you are going to feel your best in that range.
Okay, so let's talk about what those levels are for the ones that we've already discussed. The T1, 2, 3, the TSH you said below 2, but just tell us what the optimal level should be for those.
Sure, would love to. So TSH, we want below a 2.
Yeah,
Free T4, we don't care about. One thing to note is if free T4 is higher, if that is in the upper quadrant of the range, so it would be usually like a 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 or above, that can actually indicate that you have a conversion problem or that you're on too much T4. Then we move on to free T3. We want that in the upper quadrant of the range. So this makes it very universal for labs. When we say upper quadrant, just take that standard reference range,
yeah,
cut it into 4, and
yeah.
that's where you want to be for the free T3 is the upper quadrant or a little bit over. It's okay if you're a little bit over, not a problem if you're flagged high. Reverse T3 is relatively universal as well. Most lab tests, even in other countries, we want that below a 12.
Okay,
And then there are the TPO and the TGA antibodies, and
right.
these tests for Hashimoto's.
Yeah, that's where
These,
I'm going to the next phase, but I'm going to be sure we covered the ones we've already talked about. Those.
yep.
Okay, so what reverse? The reverse T3. There's not a reverse T4, right?
No, just reverse T3. Yep.
Okay. So those are the ones T1, T2, T3, all on T4 and reverse.
Well, there's no tests for T1, there's no tests for T2.
Yeah,
So we're just going to look at TSH,
yeah,
free T3, free T4,
yeah,
reverse T3,
yeah.
and now we have the antibodies.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about those antibodies because those are really if you have an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. So those antibodies we want at 0. And this is really important for people to take notes on because there are many times, and I have heard this across the board from patients that have come into the practice. They've seen conventional, they've even seen functional medicine doctors who told them, you do not have Hashimoto's. Then I look at their labs and even their history of labs. And I said, well, wait a minute. Back here last year, your TPO showed that you had 20 antibodies and your TGA had 5. Oh, but wait, it wasn't flagged in the reference range. So let
uh-huh.
me give you a little analogy so you'll understand what I'm talking about here.
Yeah,
When we're talking about antibodies, I want you to think of them as soldiers that
Yeah,
are attacking your thyroid. So, really, I mean, any antibody for any autoimmune condition, you could test rheumatoid arthritis antibodies. Those are soldiers attacking your joints. So,
right.
for Hashimoto's, these are soldiers attacking your thyroid because they think that your thyroid is a bad guy. They're just really confused. Whenever we're talking about autoimmunity, your body is confused. It thinks that an organ or a joint or your small intestine or whatever it is a bad guy. So they go
Yeah,
out and attack it.
right.
So those antibodies are soldiers. So if you think about it that way, then this next part is going to make sense. So we do a test, and let's say that standard lab value range for thyroid peroxidase antibodies, TPO,
Yeah,
is less than 34. That's a very, very common reference range for the TPO antibodies, less than 34. So you come in at a 20, and your doctor, and in particular, this functional doctor that one of my patients saw before coming to us, who told her you don't have Hashimoto's, looked at that 20 marker for her TPO, looked at the standard reference range, oh, it has to be less than 34, and says to her, you don't have Hashimoto's. So I go, oh, okay. So wait, you're gaining weight, you're losing your hair, you have no energy, you don't poop every day, but you don't have Hashimoto's. Are we just going to wait until those 20 soldiers build up to until they get to 35 when
yeah,
you actually get that H next to it and it turns red? At that point in time, do we say, okay, now you have Hashimoto's, now we can do something? Meanwhile, you're 30 pounds heavier, you
yeah,
can't get off the damn couch because you're too
yeah,
tired, you've
yeah.
lost all of your hair, you have no libido, you're bloated all the time. Why don't we address it now, when we see the first signs of those soldiers building an army, and say, yeah, you have Hashimoto's because you have antibodies? So long story short, I want those TPO and TGA antibodies at zero.
Okay.
Zero.
So, what's the difference between the two?
They're just two different markers. So TPO is way more common, and TGA can, when we have positive thyroglobulin antibodies, that number one does indicate Hashimoto's, but can be correlated to thyroid cancer. Not always. I don't like to scare people, but can be correlated to thyroid cancer being present.
Okay, so let's just say you're above one and you do have the antibody, so you do have Hashimoto's. How does other autoimmune conditions affect those results?
So, one thing to keep in mind is autoimmune begets autoimmune, where we see one, we see more than one. So, it's not that the other autoimmune conditions are affecting the Hashimoto antibodies, but we tend to get a spread with autoimmunity. So let's say those soldiers start to build. And we see this more when people are really, really high in their antibodies, in the hundreds and the thousands.
Yeah,
And what ends up happening is those soldiers go out, they attack the thyroid because they know it's a bad guy. And then let's say, okay, let's move over here to someone's small intestine. And now you have celiac. And this can also occur with the consumption of gluten,
yeah,
because gluten looks like the thyroid gland. It's called molecular mimicry. So it looks under the microscope very similar to the thyroid gland. And
right,
then those soldiers see gluten come into the body, think it's another bad guy invader. They
right.
launch an attack, and you start to build your army. And as that army builds, it naturally goes to other places of the body. So we normally do see more than one autoimmune condition when we see one present.
Okay. So the other question I had is, how does leaky gut and other microbiome disorders, LPS and zonulin and occlusion, how do they affect the thyroid?
So that's going to set you up more for an autoimmune, for autoimmune being present. So we use that three-legged stool analogy with autoimmune conditions. I think it's perfect. So on the one leg, you have the genetic predisposition. Someone in your family has some autoimmune condition. It doesn't have to be Hashimoto's. It can be any autoimmune.
Right,
Then we have that other leg of the stool, which is leaky gut, which
right,
these days, I mean, who doesn't have leaky gut these
right.
days? with
exactly.
the amount of chemicals and toxins that we're being exposed to. I mean, chlorine, fluoride, BPA, food
Right.
dye, which hopefully that's changing, but just
Yeah,
all of these toxic chemicals just destroy the gut lining. So it's very, very common for leaky gut to be present in a person, high levels of zonulin, which is an inflammatory marker that we can measure.
yeah,
And then we have that third leg of the stool, which is a trigger. So you have somebody that has leaky gut, has that genetic predisposition, and then let's say they go into perimenopause,
yeah,
which I always say thyropause. The definition of thyropause, thyropause affects every woman over the age of 40
yeah.
because it's when your thyroid hormone levels decline due to fluctuating bioidentical hormone levels. So when your progesterone, when your estrogen, when your testosterone starts to fluctuate like that in perimenopause,
Yeah,
and this even happens in pregnancy, ladies. So even
yeah,
something as natural as being pregnant or even in puberty, any kind of hormonal
change.
roller coaster fluctuations
Yeah,
can turn on that switch
yeah.
of Hashimoto's, of autoimmune.
Okay, and then what about candida?
And candida plays a role, but it's not a direct, it's not really a direct role. So more with candida, when someone has hypothyroidism, I will see blood sugar dysregulation and insulin resistance.
Okay,
9 times out of 10, that will be present. And
okay,
then we know that candida can be fueled from having that insulin resistance, from consumption of carb, sugar. So it just kind of it's more of feeding a downstream effect of the thyroid.
okay, good. Okay, so you just referenced the other hormones. So let's talk about that for a moment. How, what should the optimum levels be of the other hormones that are going to keep your thyroid healthy and free of autoimmune?
Yes, yes. So important to talk about the other sex hormones too. And also important to note for the audience that you could find a thyroid expert over here, someone that claims to be, and a hormone expert over here. And you'll ask the hormone expert if they do thyroid, and they'll say no. And you ask the thyroid expert if they do hormones, and they say no. That should be a huge red flag where you want to run
Yeah,
far away from that practitioner because those two go together. So
correct.
that's why when I say I'm a thyroid and hormone expert, I'm a thyroid and hormone expert because they have to go together. You cannot address one without the other. So I'll explain why. Number one, we know that the thyroid itself can throw someone into early menopause. It will, when the thyroid is low, it will push a man's testosterone into the toilet. Every time I see a man with Hashimoto's, and we know it affects women more than men, but
Yeah,
every time I see these poor dudes with Hashimoto's, their testosterone's in the toilet. It's just a
yeah,
shame. So we know that there's an interplay. Now, on the flip side, the reason why men have less autoimmune in general is because they in general have higher testosterone levels. So even a low T for a man is still higher than most women, right? So they
yeah,
have that protective layer. And that's what testosterone does is it protects us against autoimmune. So in addition to giving us motivation and drive and strength and changing our body composition and lighting up our brain and helping us think and focus,
yeah.
it also protects us against autoimmune, which is beautiful. So we need testosterone levels to be optimal. Optimal testosterone levels for a woman, total testosterone, I always want to see above a 50. So
Okay,
50 would be minimal.
yeah,
And side note, most labs cut you off at 48. So in order to even hit the bottom of the barrel optimal range, you have to be flagged high, which
yeah,
is comical. It's like, oh my gosh, okay.
yeah,
So the standard lab value range doesn't even encompass where women should start. And then the free testosterone, I like that in the upper half of the range for women.
yeah,
When we're talking testosterone for men, at least above an 800.
yeah,
I'm sorry, even if you're 70, 80 years old,
yeah.
you should have an 800 total testosterone or above, which means that you should be on TRT. Free testosterone, we like it 20 or above, but usually a little bit higher. I like it around like 50 or whatever for men for free testosterone. But then we go into the estradiol and progesterone levels. So important for both sexes. Estradiol for men, we want it below a 30. Estradiol for women, we want above a 50, but really closer to like 80 to 120. Independent of age, that's where you're going to feel your best for estradiol, because estradiol helps with vaginal lubrication, helps with our brain, lowers our risk of Alzheimer's, helps with our skin, our hair falling out is huge when estradiol levels are low.
Yeah.
And then we move into progesterone, which progesterone helps us sleep, protects us against cancer, helps with osteoporosis. So does estradiol. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many benefits to hormones. We'd be here for an hour listing them all.
Right.
But progesterone levels, here's where it gets a little tricky. So if you're taking an oral, and this is very, very disputed. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I heard so and so on this other podcast say the opposite, we're both right. Because there's really I cannot find a definitive, agreed upon, solid answer to this. If you are taking an oral progesterone, which is beautiful because it helps you sleep, it calms your brain, helps with anxiety. If you're taking an oral progesterone, there's a really good chance it's not going to show up on blood. So we can dose progesterone based on how you feel. And that's where those four most important words come in. How do you feel? If you have insomnia, if you're anxious, if you're jittery, if your just mood is off, the classic low progesterone sign and symptom for women is when your family or friends are going, why are you so bitchy all of a sudden? It's true. It's like, oh yeah, you're low in progesterone. Okay. Progesterone helps with PMDD. It helps with heavy bleeding, helps with irregular cycles. It should be given to girls for birth control over birth control because birth control is synthetic. Real progesterone is real. And even men benefit from a little bit of progesterone because men have anxiety, men have insomnia, men have protection against cancer too. So we can give them a little bit of progesterone as well.
So what was the level of the progesterone that's optimal?
Well, that's the thing. So, okay, optimally, we like for women to be in like the double digits with progesterone when tested on days 19 to 22 of your cycle. If you're not cycling, then you can test whenever. But that's the thing. It's like if a woman comes to me and she's not on any progesterone and we see her P level is like a 0.1, or I've seen it like indetectable, less than 0.3 on the lab, well, then of course you need progesterone. If you're over 40, you should be looking at thyroid hormone, testosterone, progesterone, and estradiol. You should be looking at them all because hormones give us life and they give us quality of life. But we can't necessarily go by the number because I've also replaced someone's progesterone. And I have a patient, we have her on 600, 800 milligrams of progesterone, and we still can't get that blood number over a 5. But who cares? Because she's sleeping and she's calm and she feels fantastic. So we just go, okay, don't really care about the number. We're dosing and basing this on how you feel.
What about DHEA?
DHEA, I just like it to be in range, a little bit like upper quadrant of the range, upper half of the range. If it's over range, this is really interesting and something I see quite often. I go, are you taking any DHEA? They go, no. I go, well, then you're stressed. Because when that DHEA goes high and you're not taking, and I have them comb through their, are you sure it's not hidden somewhere? And your supplements like biotin, like, oh, look, it's in my multi. But I have them look to make sure that they're not taking DHEA or getting exposed to it. And then if it's high, then I go, then you're really stressed out.
Okay, so what about some of the other supplements like vitamin D3, calcium, magnesium, some of the other supplements that can affect your thyroid? What are they and what should they be level-wise?
So these are, I'll go over some of the, what I call the no duh supplements. So meaning, of course, duh, you're going to take these every day. So that's going to be your iodine, which is very, very important for thyroid. If you are not taking iodine, it's going to show up as low. If you are taking it, it's going to show up as high. So there's really no need to test for it. You just take it. Every cell in the body needs it.
Can you take iodine on your skin topically rather than ingesting it?
It's not as effective. Okay. So a lot of people do that as a test. It's kind of like an old school test of iodine, that if you put it on your skin, you see how fast it absorbs, and that kind of tells you if you need it or you don't.
Yeah.
I've interviewed Dr. Brownstein. He's like, No, but not, and he's the guru of iodine. I love this man's brain on iodine. He's written so many books. And yeah, it's just not as effective for a test, and it's not as effective to be absorbed.
Is
Now,
is
I mean,
that
putting iodine on a boo-boo or something, that's
yeah?
fine.
Is
Yeah.
that Neil Brownstein from Hawaii that you're talking?
This is Dr. David Brownstein from
Oh,
Michigan.
oh, okay. Because there was a Neil in Hawaii when I was living on Kauai. Um, and then what about selenium?
Selenium, that's a great question because so many thyroid patients overdo selenium because they read it in a blog that
Yeah,
selenium is fantastic for your thyroid, fantastic for conversion,
yeah,
but you can take too much. A lot of people will take 200, 400 micrograms of selenium every single day. You really only need 100 every other day, or I say go natural and just eat like a couple Brazil nuts. Now, some
right,
people will say, oh, you can't get enough selenium from Brazil nuts. Listen, whenever we can get it from our food,
yeah.
let's get it from our food. If it happens to be, 25, 50 micrograms in your multi, that's fine. Just eat a Brazil nut every day, and that's going to cover you.
And if you overdose on selenium, what's the result?
You can push up your reverse T3 and actually hinder conversion of T4 to T3.
And why is that?
I don't know the mechanism of action. I just see it as it's one of the things, one of the many things we look at when we're looking at elevated reverse T3 and what triggers that. But
Yeah.
whenever I see labs and someone is flagged high on selenium, I'm like, let's back it down. Let's because that could be driving up your reverse T3. Let's back that on down.
And I was told that you should always keep Brazil nuts in the freezer. So that's where mine are. And then I take them out and I put them in a grinder and I just use it like on top of a smoothie or something. Is that all right to do
Oh
it?
yeah. I'm gonna start doing that. That sounds good.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
is a take. And Brazil nuts by themselves are pretty hard and they don't always taste as good. But when you grind them, they become a powder and they taste really good. So I usually put that with the flax seeds.
Yeah.
Because you're a clinical nutritionist as well as a functional medicine person,
Mhm.
doctor, what is the diet? And I know this is going to kill a lot of my viewers because they're not going to like what they hear, but what is the diet that you would optimally propose for Hashimoto's or for anyone who has a thyroid issue? They don't feel good.
Sure. Well, I always say that your labs tell us how you should eat. So when we're looking at the breakdown of, we'll break this down into a couple different sections. When we're looking at macronutrient breakdown, everyone, Hashimoto's, hypothyroid or not, every single person should be consuming at least 1 gram per pound of lean body mass of protein,
Yeah,
hands down. I mean, your muscle is your organ of longevity. It's going to protect you as you age. It's going to protect your musculoskeletal system. It's going to protect your bones. I mean, it's going to protect everything. It's going to make you more metabolically active. It's going to protect you against falls. It's just going to make you look better, obviously body composition wise. So
yeah,
we need amino acids. We need protein to fuel those muscles and to keep our muscles. So 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. When it comes to the fat and carb ratio, that goes back to your labs. Are you insulin resistant? So when we're looking at insulin, I like that below a 6, fasting insulin. And when we're looking at A1C, which is a 3-month snapshot of your blood glucose levels,
yeah,
I like that 4.8 to 5.2.
yeah,
So many times I see patients coming in with an A1C of a 5.5, 5.6, 5.7. Their doctor said nothing to them. And I'm like, well, per functional medicine, you are diabetic.
yeah,
Now, is that coming from your thyroid function being off? And because these are the people they could say, I eat keto, I eat carnivore, and my blood sugar should not be this high. Right. That's coming from your thyroid, throwing off your glucose regulation, glucose metabolism.
yeah,
And then we throw in things like I have blood sugar fixer in my line. That's berberine. I love that for lowering insulin. I
yeah,
love the T2. The T2 that's in thyroid fixer. I love that because it's going to increase your metabolism. So as you lose weight, you can balance out your insulin and glucose in a better way. You can bring in more carbohydrates as your body sheds more fat. So you don't have to go as low carb as you were in the beginning. So that, and then that also, T2 also helps with insulin resistance. So I love that. But it really, the carbs and fat breakdown is going to be dependent on whether or not you are insulin resistant. Now, I have had some patients come in who, yes, they are hypothyroid, but their blood sugar control is fine. So they can get away with more clean, good sources of carbohydrates than can the person that is insulin resistant.
Okay. Okay. So then, okay. So what should be the diet, the optimal diet with respect to gluten, with
Right?
respect to, well, you already talked about the protein, but you didn't say what kind of protein. So let's,
Animal-based protein, right? Yeah, not non-plant-based protein.
yeah.
So animal-based protein that
Okay.
contains amino acids. So this does not mean beans or fake meat or soy. We should
Yeah.
actually be soy free. I don't care if you use a little bit of soy sauce,
Yeah.
but you should not be consuming soy milk, soy protein, edamame, all of that, because that can downregulate your thyroid function.
Right.
Gluten free, yes, across the board, because of what we talked about earlier. Gluten can kick up autoimmunity and build your soldiers.
Right.
Adequate amounts of protein, and really just the no brainer stuff that I know for your audience, it would be a no brainer. For the general population, you do have to kind of drive this home over and over again. Get out the sugar, the seed oils, and just quit with the processed garbage. I
Yeah.
mean, I know it's convenient. And even of course, I will grab something processed in a box, in a bag or whatever, but I also try and get it as minimal processed as possible. So I have these
Yeah.
new gluten-free crackers I found at Whole Foods, and they're made with almond flour, and
Yeah.
they have maybe like 5 ingredients, all of which I can pronounce. So
Yeah.
for that, okay. But if you're picking up something and you look at that label and it has a boatload of ingredients that you can't pronounce, it has canola oil, seed oil, anything like that in it, high fructose corn syrup, my God, that is horrendous for you. You got to just avoid that.
And it's horrendous for everything, not just your thyroid. So
Everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully this, if RFK gets confirmed, we're going to have a champion for food integrity, and this is going to make a huge difference in the common person who isn't that disciplined or doesn't really know that they're supposed to be looking at these ingredients.
Yes. Yes. I'm very excited. Yes.
And what about whey protein? Is that all right? I mean, is lactose okay? And eggs and that source of protein?
I'm totally fine with that if you can handle it. Whey protein has a tendency to spike insulin. So if you are insulin resistant, I always push those people toward the beef isolate, like collagen based types of protein. Beef isolate is my favorite, grass fed, of course. But the whey protein, if you can handle it, if you take in a protein powder and you all of a sudden look 6 months pregnant after taking it and
Yeah,
your stomach is rumbling, then maybe don't do that. Like that's your body telling you that you really can't handle it. And yeah, you can start off with some digestive enzymes. That's really helpful for digesting and breaking down your protein and assimilating the protein properly. But if your body responds like that, that's kind of a red flag. Like, no,
yeah.
you can't do that.
Again, how do you feel? That's always the $64,000 question.
It
So, all right,
totally
well,
is.
they just flagged me, and that means we're almost out of time. So I'm going to ask you to tell us more about your supplements.
Mhm.
And if you could spend a minute or two, and then tell us what kind of wonderful, generous gift you're offering to our viewers today.
Absolutely. Okay, so we kind of unpacked this T2 a little bit, but I'm going to give you a 30-second breakdown of it. So T2, I have in my thyroid fixer product and my metabolism fixer product.
Right.
And you don't have to have a thyroid problem to take thyroid fixer, but I that was my baby. That was the very first product in the line, and I named it, of course, after the brand after me. But I have been researching T2 for 15 years, and it is amazing. It actually has over 30 years of research on it. What it does is it increases your basal metabolic rate. So literally the amount of fat that you're burning at rest, it will increase that. So you get more metabolism. It works at the mitochondrial level to stimulate ATP production. So that's going to produce nice, steady energy through the day. So no highs, no lows, no caffeinated stimulation. It's just that nice cellular energy that we should be experiencing throughout the day. So it improves fat burning, it improves energy function, it browns white adipose tissue. So that's why we're all jumping into cold plunges,
Yeah.
is to actually, brown and stimulate that white squishy fat and turn it brown. It
Yeah.
helps with it helps with insulin resistance. It helps with fatty liver disease. It improves cholesterol panels. And it's non-stimulant. So you're not going to take that fat burner, right, from back in the day. Remember the fat burners that we thought,
Yeah.
oh my God, we're going to have a heart attack? It
Yeah.
doesn't do that. So
With
it's a beautiful
with
fat burner.
ephedra and caffeine.
Yeah. I mean, we all damn near died from that. So, so
Exactly.
yeah. And when we look at the human studies, we are seeing an average of a 9-pound weight loss or 4% body fat reduction in 28 days. So it really is amazing. And I think that I think T2 should come in as the forefront of fighting this obesity epidemic that we have, rather than giving everyone these expensive GLPs where you lose muscle and you lose facial fat and you get
Yeah.
Ozempic face and a
Yeah.
flat butt. Let's do something that's safe. And T2 does not burn your muscle. It leaves your muscle alone. So even when you listen to trainers, to professional bodybuilders, professional fitness and figure athletes, they will tell you that they only use T2. They do not allow their athletes to abuse T3 because it can burn muscle. So they only use T2. So it protects your muscle. So we have that in Thyroid Fixer and Metabolism Fixer. Also in those, both are, it's L-tyrosine. That's one of the ingredients in them as well, which helps your thyroid gland produce more T4 and T3. So that's a bonus for everyone across the board.
Yeah.
And yes, we are giving your audience a 20% discount. So anything on the Fixer site, you go to betterlifedoctor.com/ageless and you use the code ageless20. And that is going to give you 20% off. So you can actually try Thyroid Fixer, Metabolism Fixer, boost that metabolism, and you'll see dramatic differences.
Okay, so one last thing is, what about absorption? What if someone's really toxic and they're not absorbing their supplements through their liver? Is that going to affect, or is there anything in your products that helps to improve absorption?
So we'll do a couple different things. Number one, I do have liver fixer in my line. So I might put someone on, if someone is that extreme, I'll put them on liver fixer. We'll run that for maybe 2-3 weeks before adding another supplement in. And
Okay.
then if we are adding another supplement in, here's the thing, metabolism fixer is in powder form. And it tastes really good. It actually tastes like Tang, but it's naturally sweetened with stevia. It's
Yeah.
actually sweetened with Ono Sweet, which is a fermented stevia. So even people who can't tolerate stevia can tolerate the fermented stevia.
Yeah.
And you just put that in your water and you sip on it, and that way it is more readily absorbed that way. So anyone with absorption issues or major gut issues, I would say use the metabolism fixer because it's powder.
Okay, good, good. Well, Amie, I want to keep going because it's so fascinating, and you have, well, first of all, you're probably one of the best looking guests I've ever had. So sorry
Well,
to my
thank you.
wonderful male guests who I have some amazing male, fitness people and doctors who are really in the know, but you take the cake. So anyway, I'm
Thank
so
you.
happy that you could come on, and you have so much energy, so different than where you were 25 years ago.
Woo.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
So thank you for being here. I'm so sorry I had this terrible cold and I'm not myself, but I think we did a good job. I
It
think
was
we
great.
and it's all because of you, that you know so much about your subject, and people are going to be writing to us. We're going to run a couple of reels to get you on exposure on Instagram. And I know you have a podcast.
Mhm.
So anything that you want to do with us on the interview for your media, social media, please feel free to collaborate with us.
Absolutely. We absolutely will. Yep, just tag us and we'll post it ourselves too. I love it.
All right. Well, you have a great weekend, and thank you again.
Thanks, Michelle.
Okay. Take care.